Hey folks, this morning I'm getting ready to get out here and get a few tasks done on my 2 days off that I have this week. I got some cleaning up to do in the garden before I start tilling and planting. I've got, as you can see behind me, I've got some more brush trimmings that I've got to burn. I also need to do some foraging this weekend. But before I get started on all these jobs, I wanted to talk to you about the coming food crisis that I'd mentioned in one of my previous videos. Now, it's pretty clear what's coming. We're already experiencing regional food shortages. Some regions are worse than others. That's why I refer to it as a regional issue. In my area, we're seeing a few things that are low on supply, but we're not really out of anything. But I have been seeing and hearing about a lot of people that are finding it hard to find even basics, like their stores don't have any chicken, or they don't have any beef, or produce is really hard to find. These shortages, we've been experiencing them for a while, obviously, but and it all depends on your location, where you live, what's around you, and as to what you're going to have available. But these shortages will continue, and they will get worse. Inflation is going to continue to rise. Gas prices are going to continue to go up. And the longer this Russian-Ukraine issue drags out, the worse that's going to affect things. Because Ukraine is a net exporter of wheat and grains. So they're not exporting anything right now. And there's multiple other countries that normally export that they're not exporting grains either. They're not exporting wheat, corn, soy, or any of that. In fact, most countries are trying to get more than they send out. There's places in the world that I've mentioned before where a certain percentage of a farmer's land has to remain fallow in order for them to receive government subsidies for growing food. They're not being allowed to use that land to produce anything to kind of fill the gaps, so to speak. So this food crisis is being engineered. It is being created, I believe, intentionally, to help push the Great Reset that I've mentioned before. It just seems like the coronavirus, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the shortages, it seems like all of it's engineered for an end game. Exactly what that end game looks like, I don't know. But it does appear to be engineered, at least from my perspective. As such, I expect it to continue. I expect it to get worse. And even experts in the agricultural industry are talking about how in the next few months to the next 2 years, we're going to see severe food shortages. We're going to be experiencing a major food crisis. This is something you really need to prepare for. Now, I've gone over it a little bit before, that you need to be producing as much food as you can, building networks with people that you can barter with, and stacking food. But I haven't gone into details. So I just wanted to take a few minutes real quick to talk about some of the things that you should be doing to get ready for the coming food crisis. A lot of times when people think of food storage, they think of freeze-dried foods, MREs, this really long-term shelf life survival food. And that's all well and good. that's fine. But the issue with that is that that stuff is generally far more expensive than regular food. And with gas prices going up, inflation hitting everything, food prices going up, for a lot of people, this long-term shelf life, the 20, 25 year plus shelf life survival food, while it's a good option, for a lot of people it's just not feasible. They simply don't have the budget to put back a lot of that food. So what I believe you should be doing is focusing on what you can get in your local stores. And you need to make the most of every dollar you have. Particularly as I believe that we are running out of time. Time is very short. You may have been prepping for 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even 15 years. It all depends, but there's a lot of people out there that are just now starting to wake up and realize what is going on. And for those people, you're really short on time. So what you need to be doing is focusing on getting the most out of every dollar and stacking as much food as you can as quickly as you can. To that end, I believe that you should be focusing on things that you can get locally. It doesn't have a 20-year shelf life for the most part. In fact, most of the shelf lives are 6 months to 2 years, maybe 3, depending on what you're buying. But there are some other things that can be put up to last 10, 15 years. The problem is you need to be stacking a large amount of food. And when I'm talking about a large amount, you need to try to, if you're just starting out, set goals for yourself. Plan for getting to 3 months worth of food stored up. Once you've got that, move to 6. Once you've got that, move to a year. And at that point, it gets really hard to stack more than a year's worth of food, but you have to keep going. Because if you look at Venezuela and Argentina, once those economies crashed, once the country basically collapsed, it's been 10, 15 years in some cases where people are still struggling for food. So you need to stack as much food as you can possibly stack, and at the same time you need to be growing and producing as much food as you possibly can. Now is the time to get started. So your best options are high value food products that you can get at the store that will last at least a year. High calorie, cheap, bulk products at the stores that will last a couple of years, and if properly packaged and stored, can last even up to 10 or 15 years. What am I talking about? Okay, let's start with the high value products. Canned meats. This is something you really need to focus on, because the most premium item that you'll ever find in one of these countries where the economy has collapsed, Argentina, Venezuela, Cuba, all these places that have these socialist governments that have collapsed the country, meat is always an extremely high priced premium. Now, the canned meats that you get at the store, they're not going to be as great a quality as fresh meats. They're not going to taste as good. They're not going to necessarily have the same texture, but it's meat. It's protein. Sometimes it's high in sodium, but it is protein. So these are things that you really need to be stocking up on. Again, you need to stock things that you will eat. The old saying is, eat what you store and store what you eat. So everything that you store needs to be stuff that you're willing to eat. Don't be spending money on things that you won't eat, that you don't like to eat. You need to be focusing on what you like to eat and what you're willing to eat. That way you're not wasting any of your money and you're making the most of every dollar. But again, high value meat products, canned hams, canned chunk ham, chunk chicken breast, chunk tuna. When you're looking at things like these, a lot of people tend to get like tuna in water for health reasons to lower the fat content. That's all well and good. But if it has oil in it, if it's packed in oil, it'll have a higher calorie content than the tuna packed in water. Canned salmon. And a lot of people don't like it, but there are things like Spam, Treat, the lunch meat. You have potted meats. You've got Vienna sausages, canned barbecue, pulled pork. All of these things can be bought in cans that have a shelf life of anywhere from a year to 2 years. These are high value items. They'll store a fairly long time. And if you learn how to cook with them, there's actually more flexibility to how they can be used than what you might believe. So these are the things that you need to be adding to your preps. Again, Spam, Treat, that luncheon loaf type meat, potted meat, deviled ham, Vienna sausages, canned tuna, canned salmon, pulled pork, the cans of ham. You can get the actual larger cans of ham, like Dax ham, or you can get small tins of a diced ham. Any of that you're willing to eat, you need to be stacking it and stacking it and stacking it. Okay, next on the list, you've got high calorie, high carb, what is a lot of people view as high carb food. You're looking at things like beans, rice. Now you can buy this in 20-pound bags. If properly stored, rice can last, if it's vacuum sealed in a Mylar bag and put in a 5-gallon bucket, rice can last 10 to 15 years. You want to be storing white rice, not brown rice. Brown rice has a higher oil content. It'll go rancid much, much quicker. It will only last a couple of years, maybe 5 at the most. So you want to be stacking buckets, and I mean buckets, 5-gallon buckets of white rice. It can be used in a lot, it's cheap, it can be used in a lot of different recipes. It's a good filler for your proteins. You can get about 25 pounds in a 5-gallon bucket. That 5-gallon bucket can add, maybe depending on the size of your family, maybe a month or 2 months to your food supplies. Stack multiple buckets. Dried beans, it's the same thing. Most people stack the pinto beans because they're the cheapest. The large lima beans, they're more expensive per pound. But again, vacuum seal them, stick them in a 5-gallon bucket in a Mylar bag. You'll be able to make those things last for 10 years. So you can stack and stack and stack these things, and they will last a long time, which allows you to stack more of them. Now, the older they get, the more water it takes to cook them. But here's the trick to that. If you use a pressure cooker, and I'm not talking about the pressure canner that you would process mason jars in for making your own canned foods. I'm talking about it's just like a little pot, but it cooks under pressure. If you soak these beans overnight and then cook them in the pressure cooker, it will take a fraction of the time and a fraction of the water to process and cook these beans, rather than just dumping them up in a pot on the stove and just boiling them for hours at a time, boiling away all kinds of water. So use a pressure cooker to cook these beans, or anything that uses a lot of water to cook. That will conserve your water supplies. Flours. All-purpose, self-rising, store it all. The shelf life is going to be probably less than 5 years. But if you store a lot of it, it's fairly cheap. If you store a lot of it and rotate it, you'll be good. You want to vacuum seal that. Some people freeze theirs to make sure there's no larvae in it. Same with the beans and the rice. They'll freeze it and then vacuum seal it to make sure there's no bugs or larvae in the rice or beans or flour. But you definitely want to vacuum seal that. That will give you maybe 5 years. Sugar. You don't necessarily need to vacuum seal that. I wouldn't vacuum seal that because it'll turn it into a large brick. It'll be like concrete. You'll have to bust it apart. But you can dump that in a Mylar bag in a bucket. You don't have to vacuum seal it. Just squeeze the air out of the bag and seal it. That will last almost indefinitely. Honey lasts indefinitely. It never goes bad. It might solidify. You can, if it does solidify, all you've got to do is place the jar in a pot of really warm water and just let it sit. It will slowly return to a liquid form. Honey is really expensive right now, so buy what you can when you can. If you want to have bees, that's great. That'll give you a high value, high quality item that you can barter with. Pastas. Pastas are cheap, really easy to store. You can vacuum seal them, but you want to vacuum seal them in double layers so that the noodles don't puncture the vacuum seal bags. Now, if you get the spaghetti in the long, thin boxes, get you a vacuum seal bag, cut it to the length of the box, slide the boxes inside the bag, and vacuum seal them in the boxes. That will help prevent the noodles from actually puncturing the bag. It'll help protect your noodles, and it'll vacuum seal just fine. The flours, the 5-pound bags of flour, you can fit one of those in a vacuum seal bag and vacuum seal the whole thing. You don't have to transfer it from the paper bag to the vacuum seal bag. Just make sure you've got it to where it'll pull the air out, but you put the whole bag in there, maybe cut a little bitty slot in the end of the bag, into the paper bag that the flour comes in. And then you can vacuum seal the whole thing, bag and all. And then you'll have already labeled what it is and what the original expiration date was. Water. Cooking food like this requires a lot of water. You can't necessarily count on having access to public water supplies. If you have a well, that's all well and good, but you need to have a backup way of pulling the water out of the well. And even if you do have a well, or you have a creek or a lake or a pond or something like that on your property, you need to think in terms of what happens if that water for some reason somehow gets contaminated or you're not able to use it. So look at water catchment, but always store bottled water, whether it's in the gallon jugs, the 5-gallon jugs, or the little 12-ounce to 20-ounce bottles. It doesn't matter. Store the bottles. That gives you more flexibility. It also gives you an item that you could possibly trade if necessary. I wouldn't necessarily want to trade water if I didn't have to, but it might be something, somebody comes along, they need some water. If you've got these individual bottles, you might be able to barter with some of those. But again, yeah, you need to make sure you have plenty of water for cooking, for cleaning, for hygiene. Water is going to be critical in a true grid down SHTF. It's going to be worth more than gold. Water is life. So be looking at that. Again, if you have a well, great. Have a way of powering that well if the power goes out. Have a backup source to that water source though. Another option would be, like I said, rain catchment, and then the bottle storage in your house. It's hard to store lots and lots of water. It's big, it's bulky, it's heavy. It takes up a lot of space, but it's something you need to be doing. Water is stupid cheap right now. There's no reason not to be adding it to your preps. And in a true SHTF, water can mean the difference between life and death. Canned vegetables. They're cheap for the most part. They're getting more expensive. But green beans, corn, all this stuff is fairly cheap. They generally have a shelf life of about a year. In most cases, if the can is not dented, rusted, or bulging or anything like that, it can last a little bit longer. The food would be safe to eat. It loses a little bit of its quality and nutritional value. But canned foods bought at the store are stupid cheap right now compared to what they will be. Stack those. Stack it to the rafters, as they say. These are things that you need to be getting. Consider getting these little packets of yeast. You can get it in your grocery store. It's the dry active yeast. You want to be buying some of that and putting it back so that you can be baking bread and stuff with your flours. These are the things that you need to be buying. Buy the basics. Buy the simple stuff. Canned tomatoes. Again, stupid cheap right now. Get it while you can. You can stack way more food buying these type of canned goods at the store than if you go and buy cases of MREs or freeze-dried foods, things that'll last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The idea here is get more for your money. If money's not as much of an issue for you, and you have the money to get this long-term freeze-dried foods, go for it. But like I said, most people, particularly now, money is a very big deal. They have to keep it within a certain budget. And it doesn't matter if your budget is $20 a week. That's all you've got to prep with. You can do it. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. You've got to really think and plan, but you can do it. Every time you go to the store to buy something, if you use, like, let's say you made a pot of spaghetti one night. Next time you go to the store, you need to buy 2 cans of spaghetti sauce, 2 things of noodles. You want to it's called copy canning. If you use one, next time you go to the store, buy 2 to replace it. You can slowly build up a pantry, build up an inventory of food. Before you know it, it's not as fast as if you can go to the store and spend $300, $400, $500 on groceries. But if you do that and you do it regularly and you make smart decisions on what you're buying each week, it'll stack up faster than you think. We're running out of time. Food shortages are going to be a major issue towards the end of the year and into next year, I believe. The longer this goes, the worse it's going to get. Stack this food, folks. You have got to be able to take care of your families. Whoever controls food can control you. Don't let them control you. Take care of yourself, take care of your family by planning ahead and prepping. That's all I've got for right now. That's just some of the stuff that I wanted to talk to you about prepping, about buying. There's so much more that you need to be stacking, but if you're starting out, that gives you an idea of what to start on. If you've been doing this a while, continue to add to your preps. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff I didn't even go over, but that gives you a place to start. It's not just me talking doom and gloom, explaining what I see is coming. This is trying to give you an idea of where you need to start and what it can do for you. So I'll be doing some more videos soon. I'll probably be doing some more videos this weekend while I'm off, while I'm trying to get a bunch of this work done. But I wanted to get this out here because it is critical that you start prepping. You stack food as fast as you can. You grow your own food as much as you possibly can. You connect with people that you can trade with. If they can grow something that you can't, that's perfect. Figure out a way of trading with them. Anyway, that's all I've got for right now. I've got a lot of work to do, and I got more videos to try to shoot this weekend. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. And keep on prepping, guys. Until next time, take care. Catch you later.